Everyone's having a good night. Okay, so I see a lot of faces who weren't on last week, so it is a continuation, but we're talking about the halachas that relate to netilas yadayim, of washing your hands. And so sometimes we think that halachas that we do all the time very simple, but the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah, they give a lot of airtime to this halacha. So we spoke about it last week, and we're going to speak about it this week too. And it looks like the way this program works is one page Mishnah Berurah per day. So we just do one page per day. So however long that takes us to get through the material. So it looks like we might even next week too might also be speaking about. But we were speaking about different parts of Netilas Yadayim. Right, last week we spoke about the different elements of when to say the bracha, drying your hands. This week there's a different part of the halachas of Netilas Yadayim that we're focusing on, and it's about they say the simon is called be'ezek kli notzlin hayadayim. What type of vessel do you wash your hands? Type of kli. A kli means a vessel. The ketzad yavohu mayim liyadav, and how should the water get onto your hand? So let's start with the first point, which is that in the explanation of this topic, we were making an assumption, which is that you need a vessel, you need a kli. So the Shulchan Aruch says that if you wash your hands for netilas yadayim, it's very important. A lot of people aren't aware, but we always have a cup in the sink. But he says you need to use the cup. Meaning, if you wash your hands without a kli, then that doesn't work for netilas yadayim. And why is that important? The Mishnah Berurah explains is because it relates to this is siman kufnan test in the Shulchan Aruch. If anyone wants to follow, that's 159 in the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah. So the Mishnah Berurah explains that why do you need a kli? Why do you need to wash your hands in a vessel? I mean, the vessel needs to be the one to wash your hands, because it's the Rabbanan Mein Asmachta basically compared it to the biblical obligation of mechatas, the water that they use in the korban of mechatas, or kiddush yadayim reglaim b'mikdash, or how they would clean the hands in the base of mikdash, and there they needed specifically to have a kli. They needed to do it in a vessel. So too, when we wash our hands for netilas yadayim, that also needs to be in a vessel. And we spoke about why we're even doing netilas yadayim in the first place. And one of the reasons we gave was because it's sort of this way for us to be prepared for when the Beis Hamikdash comes, that we're going to be ready. All the Kohanim are going to be trained. They're going to have been doing netilas yadayim, and so that way they're going to be able to eat the truma when the Beis Hamikdash comes. Because if they're not prepared, and if they don't do it, and we don't all do it, they're not going to be ready. So that's one of the reasons why we do netilas yadayim, and so that's why we're doing it specifically in a kli. So Shulchan Aruch, he lists a few dinim, few rules as it relates to the vessel. So we'll just list them off. We're going to go through all of cooking tests, so I'm going to try to cover a lot of it. So we try to just do the highlights. He says you need to do it in a kli. He says all kalim are kosher. Any vessel is kosher. Okay. But he says not exactly, because it needs to hold a revius. How much is a revius? So as always, there's a debate with measurements, how much exactly that measurement is. This says that the Chazon Ish says 150 centimeters cubed, which is 0.15 liters, and Chaim Noah says 86.4 centimeters cubed, which is 0.086 liters. And so that's I think when I please correct me if someone knows better. But I looked up how much is like a shot glass, and they said that's 0.04. So, I think so that would be either 2 shot glasses or that's just from what Google tells me. What that would seem to be enough according to Chaim Noah. And 1, 2, 3, 4 shot glasses would be enough according to everyone. It would seem. So that's not so much water. It's not so much water. But the kli needs to hold that amount of water. Okay, so that's how big it needs to be. Also the kli shouldn't have any, this cup that you're using shouldn't have any holes. It should be able to hold water without it coming out. It shouldn't be broken. It should be able to stand on its own. It was made specifically not to be. They give a lot of time. I think we weren't always so wealthy as a community as we are now, and so used to be they had a cup. It was expensive to get a new cup. They used to try to fix it up, and we still keep using it. Now, if our cup breaks, our cup has a hole, our washing cup gets a hole, what do? We go to the store and get a new cup. But it wasn't always so easy. So that's why there's a lot that talks about how exactly at what point it becomes non-kosher, where the hole is on the cup. But for us, that's not really a focus. Right? He says all kalim are kosher. We just have to, just the work, the real work in the beginning of understanding this is understanding what exactly constitutes being a kli. What is a vessel? What is a cup? If it has a hole in it, is that called a cup or is it not called a cup in it? Okay, so so there's a lot to talk about there, but that's not going to be our focus. Just an interesting point is that what about our washing cups? Sometimes we have nice washing cups, but what about if you let's say you staying at an Airbnb and you don't have a washing cup, so could you use a plastic cup? What would be the problem with the plastic cup? It works like a cup, right? There's no hole in it. What should be the problem there? So there are those who say that because it's a cup that you would just use once and then you would throw it out. The term is called chad pamis. Chad means one, pamis means time. So one time. So maybe that shouldn't count as a cup. So there are those who are stringent this way, and they say no, it's better not to use this as a cup to wash your hands. There's also a big discussion about using a plastic cup or a paper cup that you would throw out for kiddush. That's also a big discussion, which we're not going to have right now, but just to know that exists. So that's so there is that discussion if you can use a plastic cup. And some say better not to use a plastic cup in any case, no matter what. There are those who say you can use one of these cups, a plastic cup or a paper cup that you're going to throw out, but only if you designate it. Only if you designate this cup to be your washing cup. Meaning, sometimes you see like, okay, you got like a bunch of plastic cups. You got this one here, this one there. So they say, so this is quote from the Shias Jewish or Lakio, and he says, don't just take any random cup. Maybe take a cup, label it, and say this is the washing cup, and then you continue to use that cup if you need to. And then there are those who say you don't need to worry about this at all. They quote from Rav Vosner, who says it's no problem. That he says there's no. He's saying when you use a plastic cup, do you feel like your cup's any worse? No, the cup works. Plastic cups work, paper cups work. So there's no reason why we have to say the cup doesn't work. And Eliezer also says you can use it even lechatchila, which means even if you have this cup and another cup, you could even use it if you want. So those who want to be machmir have opinions of machmir, and those who feel like it would be a big problem for them to be machmir on it have other opinions who seem to be mako about this topic. Okay, what about this is I think the most interesting part of this topic is that Shulchan Aruch says, what if he says what they talk about washing your let's say you give the case of a construction worker. So a construction worker, he's on the site and there's no cups available. He doesn't see any cups, but he realizes he's got his big yellow hard hat on his head. So he says he's got a good idea. He says he's got a cup. I'm gonna use my hat. I'm gonna fill it up. That's gonna be my vessel, right? Because that's why should that not be a kli? I'm gonna wash my hands with that. That should totally work. So Shulchan Aruch says that he says even though it's true, it could work. He says, yeah, but your hard hat isn't made to hold water. When you bought that hard hat, you didn't say, you know what, this is gonna be a bowl for me. I'm gonna use this to wash my hands. No, you wanted a hard hat to protect yourself. That doesn't work. But he says, meaning let's say like you have no other choice, right? It's either this or you can't wash your hands at all. It would be mutter. He says because he says over drachim or give him this because he says it was a way for people who usually were going on were traveling that they used to actually drink. They used to actually drink from these things. So so uh so the Mission Brewer quotes that there is a little bit of a dispute about this, and some people say only if it's really shas gadol, which I don't know how you define. I don't know how you define it. You'd say like really, really, really need it. You really have no other choice, and you should use it. And when you use it, don't say a bracha because we're not sure if this works. Right? Sometimes we feel like if we don't say a bracha, we're not doing the mitzvah. So it's not really true. You can still do the mitzvah even if you don't say the bracha. Of course, it's better to say the bracha. And usually people take the mitzvahs more seriously to say brachas. But in this case, since we're not actually sure, don't say a bracha when you do this. And they also quote from the Dirshu from the Chazon Ish. He says, don't. He says better not to do this also. So I wouldn't, hopefully that's not the case. You don't need to put water in your hard hat, but it is an interesting discussion. They also have a discussion about where we said it needs to be from a keli, needs to be from a vessel. You need to wash your hands from a vessel. So what about and they say that the vessel shouldn't have any holes in it. Once it has holes in it, so now it's not really called a cup because it's now it's kind of more like this faucet thing which holds water for a little bit and then the water comes out. That's not really a cup. So I mean, again, it depends how big the hole is. There's a lot of discussion there, but it kind of implies from the discussion. If let's say you had a Gatorade cooler, so Gatorade cooler, like there are different versions of Gatorade coolers, but there's some versions of Gatorade cooler that at the bottom they have this little piece that you basically pull out and push back in. So when it's pulled out, water comes out with a strong flow. And if you push it back in, then the water sucks. So they say, what about that? Is that called having a hole in it? And so that it's if it's having a hole in it, then that's not called washing your hands from a keli. That's not from a vessel, so you can't use that. But if it's not called having a hole in it, then good idea. Just push it open and then stick your hands under there. 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, right? And then that's good. So they quote that it's okay. That would actually still be called a kli. That would be mutter. And they also quote that you shouldn't. The Shulchan Aruch says later, we're going to see, we're in Siman Kufnan Tes 159. So he says in 162 Kuf Samach Beis that if you wash your hands and then you wait a little bit of time in between, then that's not good. He says, nevertheless, since in this case, right, you're pulling out, pushing back in, pulling out, pushing back in, you're doing it very quickly, that would not be a problem for that. So you would be okay. Can you wash your hands with ice or steam? So we haven't really gotten to the different types of liquids. That's Kuf Samach. So Kuf Samach, but I think that'll be next week where we talk about the different actually liquids that you can use to wash your hands. But I assume it's going to be a good discussion. So there's another issue. Another issue that as relates to kalim, different vessels that you need to washing your hands, different requirements, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch says in Sif Zayin with Tzarich She'yavo Hamayim Mikolach Nosein. So this is very important. That it's not enough for it to just come from a vessel. It needs to have come from a vessel and also have come from someone basically using the vessel. The strength of koach means strength. Nosein means like giving. So someone needs to have actually poured the vessel, and someone So if someone needs to, you can be the one to do it, right? But it can't be that you just find this cup that's turned upside down, right? You're walking in the street and the cup's upside down, and you stick your hand. You don't know how that got there. That's not koach no stain, right? There's no one who actually turned it over, so that would not work for Netilas Yadayim. So for example, if it came flowing out of a pipe, right, and the pipe all works on its own, so that would be no good. There is a discussion though. There's the Mishnah Berurah says that there seems to actually be a machloket. There's an argument if you actually needed to come from someone being the one to turn the kli over, or does it just mean it needs to come from an actual kli itself? So he says it's not actually so clear. There are those who say that you could rely on it not coming from a person, but it still needs to come from, like, a person doesn't need to be to have one pouring it on you. But the Shulchan Aruch also says like, let's say this would be the case that if there's like this really big I don't know, jug of water, and someone leaned it in the beginning of the day, and so now what's happening is that water's flowing out of this jug. So you come like 4 hours later, so water's still flowing out of this jug, and this guy in this morning, he leaned it, so that technically is coming from someone's physical activity. They caused the water, right? They are causing the water to be flowing out, even though they're not actually there. So that actually would work. The Shulchan Aruch paskins that it would be okay. The big discussion is, what do you do, right? I think we've all experienced a situation. You get to the sink, there's no cup, and you're like, can I wash my hands out of the faucet? Right? Can I wash my hands out of the faucet? So from the beginning of the share, you think no, right? You think absolutely not. There's not. You need to put it in a cup, right? If there's not in a cup, then how could you wash your hands? So there's a very long discussion here about washing your hands from a faucet, and so the problem is, right, that you don't have the kli. So some people say that could be that maybe inside, maybe maybe you can call the little faucet where the water stores up as a kli, but others, they really don't like that. They say that's not called a kli, and you can't use it. You can't turn on, turn off. Stick your hands back and forth. That wouldn't work for washing your hands. There is a suggestion that is written here, which will, I'll say the suggestion out, but we're going to have to explain why it might work, is that maybe you should do two things. Maybe you should wash your hands, right? Do the washing your hands trick, and also, plug the sink. You could plug the sink, make sure the water stays there, and do something called tvilas yadayim. What's tvilas yadayim? So there's another way. You don't need to just you don't need to wash your hands only, but you could also, in some situations we're going to discuss, that maybe you could actually dip your hands, right? Dip your hands into the water, and then that would work instead of netilas yadayim. So he says do both of them, wash your hands and do tvilas yadayim, dip your hands into the water, not washing it one underneath, one under the water. Do it inside the water. Do both of them, and then maybe that should work, but still don't say a bracha because I'm still not sure. That's what they quote from I think Rav Yaakov Fisher. I think Rav Yitzchak Fisher. I'm not sure what his first name is, but that's what he says. That's from the Minchas Yitzchak. That's from the Minchas Yitzchak. That's what he suggests. So I asked today. I got a chance to ask Rav Schechter what he thought about that. I said, what do you think? If someone does this, can they wash their hands out of the faucet? And he told me, you might want to close your ears if you're looking for a different answer, maybe close your ears. But he said, tell them not to eat bread. They don't need to eat bread right now. They can wait. Okay, so that's what Rav Schechter said. Those who are closing their ears, you can open your ears. Okay, so let's talk about some other issues that about washing your hands. Okay, so what about washing your hands? So who can wash your hands? Anyone can wash your hands. Even someone who's not obligated right? So let's say a non-Jewish person is able to wash your hands, that would be no problem. Um, the Shulchan Aruch says you cannot have a monkey wash your hands. You cannot have a monkey wash your hands. That's what he says. And the reason, um, yeah. So I didn't see anyone discuss this, but I was wondering, yeah, because because they said that the reason the monkey doesn't work is because he doesn't have any knowledge whatsoever. It's just an animal, and also it's not coming from a person. So that's why it wouldn't work. I didn't see anyone discuss this, but I would assume, I didn't see a discussion, but I would assume that if a robot, maybe that's not true, maybe a monkey we might not have, but technology advancing, you might have these robots come in soon. So what if a robot washes your hands? I don't think it would work because it's not coming from the koach of a person. It's not coming from the strength of a person. Person's not. First of all, the robot doesn't have das. I mean, maybe you could debate that the robots are going to be very intelligent, but also it's not coming from a person. So I would think a robot's not okay, but what do I know? And maybe when it becomes a relevant issue, people will talk about it. So also when you wash your hands, the Shulchan Aruch says that it's important to have kavanah. You should have intention. You should know that when you're washing your hands, I'm washing my hands for the mitzvah. That's important to know. But Rosh Shlomo Zalman says this is a good thing to know, to be aware of also, that says that even though you're supposed to have kavanah, so you're supposed to have specific intent when you wash your hands, you should know that, okay, let's say I never, I don't usually wash my hands in a cup and go 1, 2, 1, 2. I never do that. So if I do that, the only time I do that is when I wash my hands for Netilas Yadayim, to eat bread, or in the morning. So then I can assume that when I'm washing my hands this way, that my kavanah is, right, my intention is for me to be washing my hands for Netilas Yadayim. And I think we'll discuss this more, but also, why do we do it? Just to review, why do we wash our hands 2 times? That's to remove the tumah, right? The first washing of the hands is to clean the tumah, and then the second washing of the hands is to make sure that, because that water now that water has become tumah, it's become impure. It removed the impurity, but now that water itself is impure. So then we pour again to remove that water. And then also Mishnah Berurah explains, and that's why we dry our hands too, to make sure that we remove all the water off the hands. And even if you don't remove all the water off your hands, still okay, unless you are someone who is disgusted by having wet hands, which I assume most of us aren't really so disgusted by having wet hands. But that's what he says. And then we'll just finish with this last topic, which is about Tfilas Yadayim. We mentioned it. So how can you do Tfilas Yadayim? Again, what does it mean? Tfilas Yadayim is, right, when you go into the mikvah, that's called a tefillah. That's dipping yourself. You can purify yourself by going into a mikvah. So in the same way that you purify yourself by going into a mikvah, you could also purify your hands, right? Instead of washing your hands, you could purify your hands by dumping them, by putting them in a mikvah. So there are a lot of halachos about that, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in a mikvah. It could be it doesn't need to be a kosher mikvah. It could be even non-kosher mikvah, and also it doesn't need to be, for kosher mikvah, there's specific halachos about how the water needs to be taken, how much. I think the yeshiva might be doing some stuff with the mikvah, so those are important halachos. But for Tfilas Yadayim, those halachos are mostly not as important. You don't need as much water. You don't need 40 sah, which is a specific amount. You need much less. You just need to actually, the Mishnah says you need to be able to dip both your hands at the same. The Shulchan Aruch says that you need to dip both your hands at the same time. It shouldn't be running water though. But the important halacha to know before you try this is that the Mishnah Berurah explains that you can't. This is why you probably don't see it as much, or like ever, that someone does this, is that you can't do this dipping inside a kli, right? If it's in a vessel, then you can't dip your hand. So that's probably right. Most of the time you see water, it's going to be in a kli. So if it's in a vessel, you can't do this dipping. So that really limits your ability to do a tefillah, to do this dipping of your hand, to really only if like you see an ocean, right? If you have an ocean and you don't have a cup, so then you could do tefillah yadayim. Then you could do it. And when you do a tefillah yadayim, so the Shulchan Aruch says that you don't need to do it, right? When we do, yeah. So I think so. I see in the chat. So I think also that's probably why the suggestion of the sink, right? We said with the faucet to do it and put in your sink. I assume that's why it wouldn't work, because when you put in the sink, that's also maybe called kli, and that's why don't just plug your sink and then that would take care of your problem. So I assume that's why that's no good, because that's a diamond a kli. But that the Shulchan Aruch says, he says that you don't need to do this. We do this thing where you do wash 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. You don't need to do that if you're doing tefillah yadayim. You also need to dry it. Why? Because that's it's working as when you dip your hands, when you do a tefillah, that water is tar. And the only reason why we need to wash our hands, 2 times or dry our hands, is because the water becomes impure, becomes tamei. So if you're doing tefillah yadayim, you don't need to do that. And finally, there is a discussion about what to say. What bracha should you say? So the Shulchan Aruch says, don't hamaskil yadav, one who dips his hands, ein mevarich al tefillah yadayim, you say netilas yadayim. He says don't say the bracha tefillah yadayim, say netilas yadayim. But the Ramah says, Yeshomrim, some say mevarchin al tefillah yadayim or al shtifas yadayim. So the Ramah, he comes to the Shulchan Aruch, he says, no, don't say netilas yadayim, you're dipping your hands. You're not washing your hands, you're dipping your hands. You say tefillas yadayim, or shtifas yadayim, which I think means like rubbing and cleaning your hands. And the Shulchan Aruch is saying that you should say netilas yadayim. Why does he say that? If you're dipping your hands, why are you saying washing your hands? Because he says we're really doing the mitzvah of netilas yadayim, right? We were commanded to wash our hands. Does tefillas yadayim work? Yes, tefillah for you to dip your hands also works. But when you say netilas yadayim, that means any forms of cleaning your hands. So it's better to say that that's actually what we were commanded in. But the Ramah says no, you're really dipping your hands. So they quote from the Chazon Ish. He says like the Shulchan Aruch. He says say netilas yadayim. Don't say tefillas yadayim. Even if you get to this ocean, right? And you want to dip your hands, you should say netilas yadayim. But I asked Shechter today. These are 2 questions I asked him. I said, so there's discussion. This has Chazon Ish. I saw the Shulchan Aruch. He says, I thought we should say the bracha. That's what he said. He said, I think we should say the bracha. If you're near the ocean and you're going to do a tefillas yadayim, you're going to dip your hand, then he thinks you should say the bracha of the Ramah, which is all tefillas yadayim. I didn't say which one should you say, tefillas yadayim or shtifas yadayim, but I assume it was tefillas yadayim. Okay, does anyone have any questions? We went through a lot very quickly. Next week we're going to continue with, I think it's going to talk about the question that was asked on the chat, that which water is okay to wash your hands with. What if it's what if it's seltzer? What if can you wash your hands with apple juice, orange juice? These are big important questions, and God willing, we will discuss them next week. If anyone has a question,